Hello and what is up YouTube? MrsDraconis here, and today we are looking at the long-awaited patch notes for Path of Exile 3.6 Synthesis League. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the patch notes.
Okay, now read all the patch notes.
Hello and what is up YouTube? Thank you so much MrsDraconis for helping us out with the intro there today. Big shout out to the family for letting me stay up late and work on these patch notes tonight. So we are taking a look at the patch notes, and of course all of our timestamps are displayed right above us. You can of course also give us a like, a subscribe, and hit the bell for more notifications of videos and discussions just like this one. At the very end of the video there will be some discussion topics. I love participating in the discussions that we have as a community, so feel free to comment with your thoughts, feedback, opinions, as well as memes down below. So how big is the Synthesis League? Well, one of the things that I like to do whenever we have patch notes is simply give a quick rundown to compare in terms of the amount of communication that's coming out from Grinding Gear Games regarding the simply the word count of what's going into the patch notes. So to compare Synthesis to other challenge leagues is actually a little bit of a disservice in terms of the amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes, and you can see this right here just in the word count and the amount of information that they're coming out with. When you compare 3.6 to 3.4, it just blows it out of the water in terms of the amount of things going on. And it's actually more similar to the expansion, to the last biggest expansion, which was the 3.0 Loreweave expansion. In terms of the pages, it's 29 pages, which is up from 17 in Delve, and just 2 fewer than Loreweave's 31 pages. In terms of word count, it's not quite double what Delve is. Delve was at 7,600. Synthesis is at 11,000, nearly 12,000. In terms of characters, it's also up. It's pretty much in between Delve and Loreweave in terms of characters, and then characters excluding spaces, pretty much in between what you'd expect. Anyway, I just wanted to throw this out there. I know that I just track this personally, but I did want to share this with all of you just to let you guys know that when we compare Grinding Gear games and we've got complaints or we've got feedback for them, when we compare them to other industry producers and communities that are being managed by dev teams, it's really unprecedented, the job that they do in communicating with us. And really, I hope for all of us as a community, as we've all been hype and just, sitting on our hands, if we're not sitting on our hands, then we're just mashing the F5 button all day. It really is a sign of a great game that so many different people are coming back to Path of Exile after taking a break, that so many different people are waiting with great anticipation and excitement for the patch notes to come out. It really is great news for the game, and it shows that so many different players, as well as the game's developers themselves, really care and know how to build up the hype train that is every 3 months in Path of Exile. So right away there's some gem changes. So these are skills with mana tweaks only in the patch notes. So some of these skills have got mana tweaks in terms of their costs going up, and some of them have got their costs going down. But the reason for this across the board is because of efficiency in cast time for the most part. So because as a general statement, for the most part, skills and spells are getting faster to cast. Skills are getting faster to cast overall or to use. And so as we're seeing these gem changes and mana tweaks happening, it's because of that. The reason why I didn't want to list all of these out is because if you are really detailed in that regard and want to take a look, you can always look at the patch notes, which are linked down below in the video description, to see if a specific build that you were planning on running got hit. But for the most part, these are lowerings and tweakings to change in regards to channeling effects and in regards to spell casting effects in their speed. Since things are now being casted at a slightly faster rate, a lot of things had mana costs adjusted to keep up with that. So on to active skill gem changes, and these are going to be all the buffs. This is the listed set of buffs. I'm just quickly going to name them. We've got Anger getting a damage buff, Arctic Breath getting a damage buff, Bladefall with a damage buff, Blight a damage buff, Contagion with some quality of life changes, Convocation with some quality of life changes. Summoners are getting buffs here. Convocation's cooldown time is cut in half from 8 seconds to 4 seconds. So if you play a summoner, all right, like already Convocation cooldown time was a big limit onto those builds, so that's a huge buff. Cremation damage buff, Dark Pack damage buff, Discharge, massive buff onto Discharge. We're going to see a lot of players playing Discharge, I think, this league. Essence Drain buff to damage. Ethereal Knives buffed to damage. Fire Nova Mine got some quality of life tweaks. Fireball with damage. Flame Surge with some more damage. Flame Blast, more damage. Flamethrower Trap with some more damage. Freezing Pulse with damage. Frost Bomb with some quality of life changes, but I think they're a buff. We'll see what they actually end up being. Frostbolt damage, Ground Slam, quality of life. Ice Spear with some serious damage added onto it. Ice Trap damage, Incinerate damage, Lightning Tendrils damage, Lightning Trap damage, Lightning Warp with some quality of life, which is nice for those that like to use Lightning Warp to use as their mobility skill. Magma Orb has got some damage to it. Orb of Storms, which was really weird that Orb of Storms is getting more damage because it's mostly just used as a proc effect. But now maybe it'll actually have some sort of build enabling mechanics built around it now that it's got the damage to do something. Scorching Ray has got some damage, but there was also some quality of life changes to the way that Scorching Ray is going to work. So it's got damage numbers up, but I'm not sure yet whether or not that's actually going to be a buff or a nerf with the quality of life changes that have been made to it. Seismic Trap got damage. Shock Nova got damage. Siphoning Trap got damage. Spark got more damage as well as some quality of life. We're going to see a lot more Spark Boys coming back this league. Spectral Shield Throw got quality of life. Storm Call got damage. And Unearth got damage as well. I think Unearth Cremation is probably going to be a pretty popular build this league for anybody that can use it, along with Anger, since Anger got buffed so much. There's just a lot of fire damage that's now available in the game. So active skill gem nerfs. Arc got nerfed both in its quality of life as well as its damage. Armageddon Brand in both quality of life and damage. Ball Lightning, Blade Vortex, no shock there. Cold Snap, Explosive Trap, Firestorm, Glacial Cascade, Hatred, Ice Nova, Lightning Spire Trap, Storm Brand, which was going to be one of my starter builds, Volatile Dead, Vortex, and Winter Orb. I know there were a bunch of people excited to try out Winter Orb this league because I didn't jump on board during the Betrayal hype. And unfortunately, it did get nerfed. It doesn't mean it's going to be unplayable. It just means it's not as strong as what it was in Betrayal. So if you're following a build guide for any of the listed above skill gems, just make sure that you check with the guide that you were going to follow if you've already got it bookmarked to make sure that the build guide author is updating it for 3.6 because the damage is going to be slightly different or the quality of life is going to be slightly different because all of these active skill gems are getting nerfed in some way. All right, support gem changes. These all got buffed. I was surprised, like across the board, there were no real big support gem changes that were nerfs. Arcane Surge, Chain, Decay support, Fork support, Innervate support, Life Leech got some changes, but ultimately the numbers I think were buffs because now it's got increased damage for quality on it. Same thing for Mana Leech. Onslaught, Spell Cascade, and Summon Phantasm on kill support. So all of these various supports are now just straight up better, and they're going to be better in Synthesis League with the exception of maybe Life Leech and Mana Leech support because of the way how Leech is getting hit. So it'll be interesting for any build, maybe Magma Orb, that was going to take advantage of some of these different supports. It's going to look like a really, really fun league, which, shocker, GGG has been building this league up as the self-cast the Handcaster League. What a shock that a bunch of spell and support gems that support spellcasting now have got a bunch of buffs to them. So there we go. What a shock. All right, Ascendency changes. First off, the Trickster has got some changes. So Swift Killer now also causes you to gain a power or frenzy charge each second while you are channeling. Ghost Dance has been completely reworked. It now causes you to gain a Ghost Shroud every second, up to a maximum of 3, with 3% reduced damage taken per Ghost Shroud. So that means you can stack that up to 9%. When hit, you lose a Ghost Shroud and recover energy shield equal to 5% of your evasion rating, plus 5% chance to evade while you have energy shield and 10% increased movement speed while you have energy shield. So if you're going CI, Trickster, you're always pretty much going to have that. Escape Artist no longer prevents you from being stunned if you haven't been hit recently, and no longer grants 8% reduced damage taken if you haven't been hit recently. It now grants 12% increased attack and cast speed per Ghost Shroud, cannot be stunned while you have Ghost Shrouds, and 20% chance to dodge spell hits if you have Energy Shield. Prolonged Pain now grants 20% more damage over time, up from 15%. So there you go. Trickster looking to be, as always, it's always been a solid Ascendency, but I think we're going to see more Trickster boys, especially with Contagion and Essence Drain changes this league and a lot of different chaos and channeling options. Trickster seriously looks like an awesome Ascendency if you go down the path to take Swift Killer, because you're going to get power or frenzy charge each second while you're channeling. Like, why wouldn't you want that as a way to generate charges? You don't have to dedicate an item slot to that now, or a stat line to that, which is just awesome. All right, the Inquisitor has got 2 changes. Sanctify has been renamed and completely reworked. It is now called Sanctuary and now causes consecrated ground you create to apply 10% increased damage taken to enemies you have created consecrated ground around you while stationary, and 15 mana regenerated per second while on consecrated ground. The mana may not sound like a great amount, but with so many different channeling skills coming into the game, and with Mind Over Matter still being a solid defensive mechanic, it's nothing to sneeze at while you're standing on the consecrated ground. Pious Path has also been reworked and now grants 20% increased attack and cast speed while on consecrated ground from 25%. Consecrated ground you create grants immunity to elemental ailments to you and allies, 200 energy shield regenerated per second while on consecrated ground, and consecrated ground you create lingers for 4 seconds. So the Inquisitor is now this holy consecrated ground boy. So there you go. For those of you that want to try out the Super Saiyan channeled skill, I'm sure you're going to be using the Inquisitor. Well, maybe not. That's just probably a terrible guess. And last but not least, rest in peace, F's in chat, for the Ascendant Slayer. No longer grants 20% increased damage while leeching. Now grants 30% increased area of effect if you've killed recently, up from 20%. Now also grants 50% reduced maximum recovery per life leech. Wah, 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 wah. All right, some items have been rebalanced. So, really quickly, enchantments, such as those found from the Labyrinth, now have their own mod slot on items. They no longer use the implicit mod slot. That's great. That's a buff, because remember, synthesized items take up a particular slot, and they didn't want to make us as players choose between synthesizing something and then lab enchanting it. You can do both, which is great. Enchantments for Stormburst, which previously added additional projectiles, now instead grant a chance to create an extra orb. This affects existing items. So if you've got something with that particular Stormburst lab enchant on it, it will be updated. The 3 two-toned boots base types have had their implicit resistance values lowered to 8 to 12% from 15 to 20%. Existing versions will be changed to these values if a Blessed Orb is used. So if you've got awesome two-toned boots in Standard, those are all now Legacy. So keep them that way, and don't use a Blessed Orb. Or use a Blessed Orb before the patch drops, so that way it didn't go Standard. Or sorry, it didn't go Legacy or get updated with the new values. Bone Helmet base types have had their increased minion damage lowered to 15 to 20% from 30 to 40%. Existing versions will be changed to these values if a Blessed Orb is used. So Bone Helmets are now Legacy for all of those Summoner players. Continuing with more item balance. Sources which provide aspect of the avian or aspect of the cat now have the aspect tracked, even when the item is no longer equipped. This makes it impossible to sustain one portion of the aspect's alternating buffs. The staff mod, which could appear on Shaper staffs, now grants 1 to 7 to 8 lightning damage per 10 intelligence. It was 1 to 6 to 7, so just a little bit of a buff there. You can no longer roll or craft more than 1x percentage of physical damage taken as Fire Cold Lightning mod on a single item. The same goes for X percentage of physical damage converted to Fire, Cold, or Lightning. You can now craft the damage conversion veiled mods on items that also have an increase to the damage type of the same element on them. Previously, this was restricted. So those of us that have all of those awesomely well-rolled rares that were essentially buffed up, souped up lightning coils, woohoo, all that stuff just went Legacy and is more valuable, but, you know, resistances are getting hit across the board this patch, so kind of evens out. Item balance. You can no longer craft the 3 veiled mana mods, which were available to rings and amulets, all on the same item. Each will preclude the others. You can no longer craft multiple mods, which affect an item's quality on the same item. Each will preclude the others. Fire Burst from the Essence of Hysteria can now hit up to 40 targets at a time, up from 20. It now has added damage effectiveness of 130%, which is great. That's just a great. The more you use Essence of Hysteria, the better. All right, continuing and wrapping up with Betrayal item balances. Cartography Scarabs now give 20, 35, and 50% more chance to find maps, which is down from 30, 60, 100. Sulfite Scarabs give 20, 40, 60. More Sulfite, down from 50, 100, 150. So when you look at this, you've got to realize now that Sulfite Scarabs, now at level 3, are essentially giving you just a little bit more than what level 1 Sulfite Scarabs were. Does this mean that the Scarab market is going to be dead this league? No, it means they're still going to be incredibly valuable. It just means that the power level of each individual Scarab is going to be much, much lower. Divination Scarabs now give 50, 100, 150 more chance to find Divination cards, which is altered from 100, 200, 300. So just a 50% nerf all across the board, cut in half. Improved the description of the Tectonic Slam Charge Slam chance enchantment, and added some corruption outcomes, which increased the aura effect of the new aura skills in the game. All right, so talking about unique item balancing. So this one is pretty interesting, and I wanted to pull these up so that way everybody could see what these were, because I didn't actually know what a lot of these were. So the Cloak of Tom Isley is actually a supporter-created item, and it was actually out of the game last league in 3.5. So it's pretty cool that it's back in the game, but right now nobody knows the way to obtain it. It previously was obtainable through a level 8 Forsaken Master, but obviously with the whole Betrayal experience and the Forsaken Masters passing away or moving on, joining the Syndicate as it were, you couldn't get it in 3.5. So I guess that's actually pretty cool, because the supporter that came up with this particular item wanted the item to be rather restricted in its drop chance, and so maybe they had to contact that person back again. Maybe that person halfway through the league will come out and be like, hey, here's the story behind it. But that's just a cool little piece of lore trivia about unique items in the game that I think is pretty cool and pretty fun to follow along with. Death's Oath is getting a buff. The Death's Oath aura skill now deals 25% more damage per second, which is really, really great. Then the Whispering Ice Staff, its Ice Storm skill now has a 0.75 second cast time, and also has a 6% chance to critically strike. So I don't know how many Whispering Ice builds there have been in the past. At different times throughout Path of Exile's history, there have been different builds that have come out for Whispering Ice. So I would think if there was any time for this to happen, it would be the Spellcasting League, where you just soup this thing up and really see what Whispering Ice's Ice Storm can do, especially with this particular buff for the critical strike chance. All right, the Kingmaker has had some changes to it. Most notably, it now has allies nearby have a plus 50% critical strike multiplier. Nearby allies have Fortify, and it's got 250 to 285 increased physical damage. So that's a buff to its physical damage. And then nearby allies have Fortify. Like, that's huge. If you're running in a party and you're the support, or even if you're the DPS and you're using Kingmaker, you just gave Fortify to somebody else who otherwise wouldn't necessarily have Fortify, like, I don't know, a Magic Find character. As long as you're running alongside each other, this looks like a really, really strong support weapon now, potentially. Of course, there's still other support weapons that might be better in slot, and the Kingmaker is a two-handed axe, so it's not like you can sword and board with this particular setup, so you wouldn't be using your Prism Guardian to boost more auras if you were an aura bot using it, but it at least changes some things up a little bit if you want to go with that more holy themed of a warrior support that does a little bit of damage on their own and can carry themselves through maps and through bosses and through encounters as need be. Couple other changes. So the Poet's Pen got hit. What a shock. The way how this works now is that Poet's Pen will only trigger spells socketed within it if you attacked with that specific weapon. So it used to be As long as you were dual wielding the Poet's Pen, you could trigger off spells interchangeably. However, what this will do now is it's going to be intermittent rather than interchangeable. So rather than dual wielding and casting a whole bunch of different triggered spells every single attack, now it's going to be every other attack on top of every other attack that it previously was, if that makes sense. Essentially, it cuts down the effectiveness of Poet's Pen in half. Is really what you're thinking about here. So Poet's Pen getting nerfed, which probably deservedly so. I mean, it's just ridiculous for leveling. It's ridiculous for clearing. It's ridiculous for delving. It's ridiculous for bossing. When one item stands out the way that Poet's Pen stands out, it needs a nerf. It's probably deserving of a nerf. Also, All's Uprising is also getting a buff because all of these various new aura skills that are being added into the game this league all have got all modifiers on them to find as you encounter the underground delve boss All himself. Okay, here's some other nerfs as well, some unique item balances. 1 to Tomb Fist. Tomb Fist, now the way how it's being phrased is that it's no longer going to have attack speed on it, and the warning from GGG is that existing versions of this item will lose the increased attack speed if a Divine Orb is used. And they include the phrase, "Do it, we dare you." So don't Divine Orb your Tomb Fists. If you've got awesome Tomb Fists, I've actually got a couple of these that are perfectly rolled, so I'm expecting the value to go skyrocketing through Standard. But anyway. All right, rest in peace, Loreweave. Loreweave, I was just wondering about this the other day, whether or not the value would get hit with maximum resistances getting changed and capped at 90%. And sure enough, Loreweave is getting hit. Loreweave now sets your maximum resistances to a maximum of 78%, which is down from 80%. And existing versions of this item can be updated to the new values with a Divine Orb. So in other words, if you've got a 79 or an 80% Loreweave, that's now Legacy and worth a whole bunch in Standard. Spreading Rot no longer causes enemies hindered by Blight to take increased chaos damage, and instead now causes Blight to inflict Withered on enemies for 2 seconds per copy of Spreading Rot. So that, I think, overall, the reason why I included it in the nerf is because it's overall a nerf. I think probably over the long term, obviously the longer you're withering something, the more damage they're taking. So sure, over the long term, it might actually be a buff. But over the short term, probably for clear, it's a nerf. All right, world and monster changes. Couple of different changes here. Some that are great and some that I think are potentially scary, especially for those of us that are playing hardcore this league. So Lily Roth's gems are now sorted into skills and supports, and she now sells added chaos damage, support, and detonate mines, which is great because everybody had to find those previously. Bosses, which previously had 60 or 80% less effect of curses on them, now have 33 or 66% less effect of curses on them, respectively. This includes map bosses, incursion architects, betrayal targets, breach lords, shaper, elder, and others. So everybody that was wondering, hey, if they don't touch curses, we're just going to go in there and face roll this league, right? Wrong. They did touch curses. They changed the way how curse effectiveness is going to work on bosses. Spectred Blood Chieftains now have a cooldown on their power charge generating roar, and due to Templar budget cuts, this is probably my favorite line in the entirety of the patch notes, and performance concerns, but mostly fiscal responsibility, many of the Blackguard Jaggers in the Ascent have lost their capes. That is a wonderful, wonderful Incredibles reference. No capes! Nerfs to Breachstones. Okay, this is across the board. We all knew this was coming from Betrayal. Betrayal was the single league that we saw the most number of players hit level 100. It was no shock. Why? Because once the Breachstone equation was solved, everybody was simply dumping currency into Breachstones and getting to level 100, which was great. I know a lot of different guildies that got level 100. I don't harbor any resentment towards anybody who got level 100 in Betrayal. If you do, feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments below. I think it's great that a lot of people took advantage of something that, again, the player community figured out was very, very efficient. Nonetheless, Grinding Gear Games has responded, and they have responded convincingly. The bonuses granted to upgraded Breachstone areas from It That Fled's research bonus has been reduced. Tull, Esh, and Zoff's upgraded Breachstones have had their increase to experience gain reduced to 100% for all tiers, from progressive growth per tier up to 250%. Old Natol's upgraded Breachstone experience bonus caps out at 150, down from 300, and Chayula's upgraded Breachstone experience bonus caps out at 200, down from 350. Pack size modifiers for these upgraded Breachstones have been reduced to 20, 40, and 60%, down from 35, 70, and 100%. All pure Breachstones have had their area levels reduced by 1. Charged and enriched Chayula Breachstones have also had their area levels reduced by 1. So there you go. We're going to have to find out a new way to be the most efficient people to rush to level 100 in Synthesis League, which I don't think is a bummer. I think it's great that different people in the community race and figure this stuff out. I think it's awesome that it sets a different meta every single league, and every 3 months it gives a shake-up for everybody that's in the competitive side of things to teach all the rest of us how to play the game in a more efficient way. And that's what I'm all about. I'm all about learning new stuff. So a force of change in the meta, I think, is a good thing. It teaches us more stuff about the game. So we've got some Zana mods coming to us in Synthesis that will be available. Here are the following Zana mods for those of you that maybe don't know. Zana now will have Fortune Favors the Brave, which costs 3 chaos, and one of these options will be applied at random, including those that you have not yet unlocked. This is a great expenditure of chaos orbs, especially early on in the league, because you can get wonderful mods that you otherwise haven't unlocked yet. And so over the first weekend and over the first week, as you're mapping and unlocking and leveling up Zana, this is a great way to make a little bit of extra currency. Yes, it costs 3 chaos up front. That being said, if you return, your net returns are multiple more maps, maybe multiple more levels or XP because of the zone gets increased. There's lots of different things that can happen. Maybe there's just more rare packs that you hit, and so therefore you get lucky with more div card drops or more currency drops. Path of Exile, essentially, in its economics, comes down to a risk-reward system where if you don't dump currency into the game's not necessarily simply going to give you currency back. So I think Fortune Favors the Brave is a great option for early on. Alternate of the same tier, it costs 1 Chaos Orb, requires a rare map, opens a random rare map of the same tier, excluding the map you placed in the device. This is a great way to get started in every single tier in order to unlock maps that you have not yet unlocked. Shaped tiers 1 through 5 cost 2 Chaos Orbs, requires a rare map, opens a version of your map at 5 tiers higher, randomly rolled as a rare. Shaped tier 1 through 10, which costs 6 Chaos Orbs, requires a rare map, opens a version of your map at 5 tiers higher, randomly rolled as a rare, with a chance to be corrupted, which means lots more monsters and potentially lots more mods. Elder tier 1 through 15 costs 15 Chaos, requires a rare map, opens a version of your map at tier 16, randomly rolled as a rare, with a chance to be corrupted. Zana mods continued. Nemesis, haha, Nemesis, yay! Nemesis, which costs 2 Chaos Orbs, rare monsters each have Nemesis mod, area contains additional rare monsters. For those of you who aren't aware what that means, it means you can go into a Nemesis modded map and chance a Headhunter. It does not mean that you can go into a map that simply has a pack that is Nemesis modded. People have asked that question in the past. There have been leagues where maybe there is a pack of rare monsters that will have a Nemesis buff, but it's not a Nemesis modded map. The Nemesis mod has to be applied from Zana when you input the map into the map device, into the Atlas device. That is now available, which means you can go into a map like that with a whole bunch of scouring, a whole bunch of orbs of chance, a whole bunch of scouring orbs, and just go to town on a couple of leather belts and hopefully chance your Headhunter. Bloodlines, which costs 2 Chaos Orbs. Magic monster packs each have the Bloodline mod, and the area contains additional magic monsters. Ambush, which costs 3 Chaos Orbs. Area contains 3 additional strong boxes. Essence, which costs 3 Chaos Orbs. Area can contain essences. Area contains at least 3 additional essences. Breach, which costs 4 Chaos Orbs. Area can contain breaches. Area contains 2 additional breaches. And Harbinger for 4 Chaos Orbs. Area contains Mysterious Harbingers. Area contains 2 extra Harbingers. And Beyond costs 4 Chaos Orbs. Slaying enemies close together can attract monsters from beyond. Those are our Zana Synthesis mods for the Synthesis 3.6 League. So, what are your thoughts? That's a whole bunch of stuff that we just went through. Did your build get nerfed or changed in any way? Did you end up maybe having to change your build. Are you going to have to maybe adjust what it was going to be your league starter for 3.6 Synthesis League? Leave us a comment down below. And as always, I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your likes. I appreciate your subscribes. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. I'm really stoked for this weekend, and now it is time for me to boot up Path of Building and get to work, because we've now got the patch notes, so let's work out all the kinks in preparations for Friday's wonderful, very anticipated and exciting launch. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching, and I hope today is the day that you find a Mirror of Calandra as you are planning out your starter build for 3.6 Synthesis League. Happy patch notes, everybody.